They didn't forget my birthday. They just chose to celebrate someone else's. The words came out like a joke, but the kind that makes your chest tighten instead of laugh. I was sitting alone on my leather sofa, still in my work heels, staring at a cake I'd bought myself that morning, a tiny vanilla thing with a single unlit candle. The flame never stood a chance. My name's Quinn Edwards, 32 years old, senior PR executive at Horizon Brands. I spend my days turning other people's stories into headlines, polishing their triumphs for the world to see. Yet somehow, I've never figured out how to make my own family see me. I'm the daughter who does fine on her own, the one they call when they need help, but never when there's something to celebrate. That night, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, while Facebook screamed a different story. There was my brother Miles, champagne glass raised, surrounded by family in our parents' living room. A banner in the background read, "Congratulations on your promotion." My mother's smile glowed brighter than the candles on the cake they'd baked for him. The timestamp said it all. 4 hours ago, on my birthday. I stared at the screen until the images blurred. Each photo was another quiet lesson, one I'd been learning my entire life. In the Edwards family, there was always enough pride to go around, just never for me. I used to think success could fix that. If I worked hard enough, earned enough, maybe love would follow. But that night, watching them celebrate Miles while my own candle sat unlit, I finally understood. Love that has to be earned isn't love at all. I leaned back, the glow of the laptop washing over me, and whispered into the emptiness, "Happy birthday to me." It sounded more like a verdict than a wish. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the quiet sibling, the invisible achiever, then maybe this story is for you. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd like to know if you've ever lit your own candle just to feel seen. Because what happened after that night changed everything. That birthday wasn't just another disappointment, it was the spark that burned through 32 years of silence, the moment I stopped waiting for their applause and started writing my own story. And trust me, the next chapter didn't just shock my family, it made them question everything they thought they knew about who I was. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my apartment blinds, harsh and golden, like it was daring me to face another day pretending nothing had changed. I showered, dressed, and tied my hair into the same low bun I wore to every meeting, my armor. But under the tailored blazer and the steady stride, something inside me had shifted, quietly but irreversibly. At Horizon Brands, the air smelled like ambition and burnt coffee. My coworkers greeted me with their usual smiles, unaware that I'd spent the night dissecting every photograph of my brother's party. I opened my laptop, planning to bury myself in work. Instead, an email notification appeared on my screen. Performance bonus, Horizon campaign, $82,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. $82,000, the biggest recognition of my career. I had built that campaign from scratch. Every tagline, every pitch, every sleepless night had led to this. I should have felt proud. But the first thing I thought was, they won't care. By noon, my phone finally rang. Mom. For one foolish second, hope flickered again. Maybe she'd remembered. Maybe she'd seen the post and realized. "Quinn, darling," she began, her voice bubbling through the speaker like champagne. "I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, we're planning something special for Miles and Jessica's anniversary, and I was hoping you could help. Just the catering and decorations. You're so good at that sort of thing." The clock on my desk ticked toward midnight in my mind. My birthday was over. My patience, too. "Mom," I said softly, "today was my birthday." A pause. Then, "Oh, honey, with Miles's big promotion, it just slipped our mind." Slipped their mind. The phrase landed like ice water on bare skin. I hung up soon after, her voice dissolving into static. But something inside me clicked into focus, sharp and cold as glass. Maybe this was the gift I needed, the clarity to stop begging for what was never mine to begin with. That night, while reviewing campaign data in my office, my screen pinged again. A new message, family group chat, the one I wasn't supposed to see. My mother had accidentally added me. I clicked. My father's message sat at the top. Quinn should contribute significantly to Miles's anniversary gift, at least $20,000. Mom's reply came seconds later. She just got that bonus. Time she supports the family for once. Support the family. The same family that couldn't remember my birthday. The same people who hadn't once visited me in Chicago, not even when I was hospitalized last year for exhaustion. I stared at their words until the letters blurred into shapes that looked more like currency than affection. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I was awake. I closed my laptop, picked up my phone, and scrolled to my contacts. My fingers hovered over Dad, then Mom, then stopped. I didn't owe them an explanation. Not this time. Instead, I called Jennifer, my closest friend at work. "They want me to pay $20,000 for Miles's anniversary," I said, half laughing, half shaking. "$20,000? Quinn, that's insane," she replied. "You've carried that family for years. Maybe it's time you carry yourself." Her words hit home harder than she knew. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened the bonus email again and whispered, "For me." Just 2 words, but they felt like the beginning of something. I didn't know it yet, but that single decision to keep what I'd earned would start a war I didn't plan to fight, but one I was finally ready to win. 2 days later, the storm began, quietly, the way most family wars do. It started with an email I wasn't meant to see. Mom had tried to remove me from the group chat after realizing her mistake, but somehow the notifications kept coming through. I opened my laptop between meetings, coffee steaming beside me, and there it was. My name, again, threaded through their conversation like a dirty word. "Quinn's always been difficult," Dad had written. "She'll come around once she realizes family means sacrifice," Mom replied. "She just needs to be reminded who made her who she is," Miles added. I stared at those lines until they blurred, my reflection faint in the glossy screen. Who made me who I am? They didn't even know who I was. Outside, the Chicago skyline shimmered beneath the winter sun, strong, cold, untouchable. The same way I wanted to be. That afternoon, Jennifer appeared at my office door, holding 2 coffees. "Your brother's been calling reception nonstop," she said, her eyebrows raised. "Apparently, he needs a favor. Something about Region Tech's marketing director?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "He's trying to use my work contacts again." For his investment firm, Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "So, he undercuts your credibility at work, and your parents still expect you to hand him $20,000 for an anniversary party?" I forced a smile. "Apparently, it's time I support the family." Jennifer leaned against my desk, folding her arms. "Quinn, your bonus isn't their lifeline. It's your freedom. Don't hand it back to the people who never earned it." Her words echoed long after she left. Freedom. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like something I wasn't supposed to taste. That evening, I stayed late at Horizon's glass-walled office, finishing reports while the city outside blurred into streaks of gold and steel. My boss, Lawrence Chen, stopped by on his way out. "Quinn," he said, handing me a folder. The Westfield numbers came in, 41% increase in client revenue. "You made that happen. You've earned every bit of that bonus." His tone was calm, matter of fact. No conditions, no guilt, no emotional strings. Just acknowledgement. It was everything I'd ever wanted to hear, and never had from my own family. When I left the office that night, I didn't take the train home. I walked. The cold air burned my lungs, but I needed it. I needed to feel something clean. At 9:42 p.m., my phone rang. "Dad." "Quinn?" His voice boomed before I could speak. "Your mother's upset. You're being selfish. It's not about the money, it's about family." I stopped under a streetlight, breath fogging the air. "You mean it's about Miles?" I said quietly. Silence. Then, "Your brother has responsibilities. He represents us. We all have to do our part. I've been doing my part for 32 years, I said, voice trembling but clear. Maybe it's time I stop. Don't you dare hang up on me, he snapped. You've always been dramatic, Quinn. We've given you everything. Everything. The word hit like a slap. I looked around, the city I'd built my life in, the career I'd earned without a single ounce of their help, and realized that for all their talk of family, I was the only one who'd ever stood on her own. "Good night, Dad," I said, and ended the call. The next morning, Mrs. Bennett, my 84-year-old neighbor, knocked on my door with a plate of cookies, as she did every Tuesday. She took one look at me and said, "You've got that look again, like you're trying to hold your world together with thread." I laughed softly. "Just family stuff." She set the cookies down, her voice warm but firm. "Some families are built from blood. Others are built from choice. The trick is knowing when to stop bleeding for the wrong one." That night, I sat at my window, Chicago lights twinkling like stars scattered across glass. My phone buzzed with new messages from Mom and Miles. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and typed, "Lakefront Property, Michigan." I didn't know why. Maybe I just wanted to imagine what peace might look like. Somewhere quiet, away from the noise, away from people who only remembered me when I could be useful. One listing caught my eye. A small house with a wide wooden deck overlooking the water. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows in the photos, painting the walls gold. For a long time, I just stared. Then I whispered to myself, maybe it's time. That was the moment it began, the quiet rebellion. The moment I stopped being the family's silent provider and started becoming my own protector. And though I didn't know it yet, that decision, to search for a home that belonged only to me, would be the first act of self-love my family would ever call betrayal. A week later, I found myself standing on the deck of that Michigan lake house, the one I'd only seen through a screen days earlier. The air smelled like pine and cold water, the kind of clean that made you forget everything artificial. The realtor's heels clicked softly against the wood as she spoke, but I barely heard her. My focus was on the view, the way the sunlight scattered across the rippling water, the hush of wind through the trees, the quiet that didn't demand anything from me. "You're sure you don't want to bring family to see it first?" she asked politely, flipping through her clipboard. I smiled faintly. "No, this one's just for me." She nodded, perhaps sensing something sacred in my tone, and handed me the pen. Signing those papers felt nothing like the guilt-laden checks I used to write for my parents. Each stroke of my name was a small act of rebellion, a declaration that I existed beyond the roles they had assigned me. When the final page was done, the realtor offered her hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Edwards. You're officially a homeowner." The word home settled deep in my chest, strange and heavy. I'd lived in apartments, condos, temporary spaces that looked perfect but never felt warm. This one was different. This wasn't shelter. This was sovereignty. Back in Chicago, the calls came fast. Missed calls from Mom, from Dad, even from Miles. Each voicemail sounded less like concern and more like interrogation. "Where did you get the money? Why didn't you tell us? People are asking questions. You're making us look foolish." But I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the next weekend at the lake house, unpacking boxes and painting walls, sage green in the living room, soft cream in the bedroom, sunlight everywhere. I hung my framed campaign awards, the photo of my first team at Horizon, and a small note from Mrs. Bennett that read, "Build something that reflects your peace." She'd insisted on coming to the closing with me. "You're doing the right thing," she'd said, patting my hand. "Some of us have to create the family we deserve." For once, I believed her. The following week, I hosted a quiet housewarming. Jennifer arrived first with wine and sarcasm, followed by a few colleagues and Mrs. Bennett, who brought a quilt made of blue and green fabric scraps. "For your bedroom," she said, smiling. "Every home needs something made with love. We grilled steaks on the deck, laughter mingling with the sound of lake waves and cicadas. I snapped a photo of the group against the sunset, friends who had chosen me, not out of obligation but out of affection. That night, I posted the picture with a simple caption, "Weekend at my new lake house. Birthday gift to myself." When I woke up the next morning, my phone was a battlefield. 17 missed calls, 32 messages, 8 from mom alone. Where did you get house money? Why would you post that? Do you realize what people are saying? This is completely irresponsible. Call us back. I didn't. Instead, I made pancakes, played soft jazz, and let the quiet fill every space their voices used to occupy. By Monday, even my cousin Elaine had joined the campaign of concern. Aunt Claudia's beside herself. "Uncle Richard says you're acting unstable. People think you're hiding money." I laughed out loud. Hiding money? No, I was hiding peace, because they'd never understand it. But when Mom called again that Thursday night, her tone had shifted. Polite, contained, dangerous. "Quinn, Elizabeth Edwards," she began, using my full name like a warning. "This behavior needs to stop. You've humiliated this family. The Petersons, the Carsons, even Reverend Wallace have been asking questions." "Questions about what?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand. "Why you'd buy yourself a birthday present? Why we weren't there to celebrate? It's creating an uncomfortable situation for us." I laughed softly. "Actions have consequences, Mom." Her voice sharpened. "We need to fix this. I'm organizing a family dinner Sunday night. Your father and I will explain it was all a misunderstanding, that we've always supported you." The old version of me would have agreed instantly, desperate to patch the cracks. But that Quinn was gone. "I'm available Tuesday," I said evenly. 7 o'clock. "And I'll bring the photo albums." She hesitated. "What photo albums?" "The ones I've been keeping since I was 11, I replied. "The ones that prove exactly how much you've supported me." For the first time in our lives, my mother had nothing to say. As I ended the call, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Hair unbound, eyes steady, posture straight. The woman looking back wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She was preparing for truth. And somewhere in the stillness of that Michigan night, I realized they could call it rebellion, selfishness, or betrayal all they wanted. I called it becoming whole. Tuesday came dressed like Judgment Day. The sun was too bright, the air too still. As I drove toward my parents' mansion on Lakeshore Drive, the city's noise faded behind me, replaced by the steady drum of my heartbeat. In the passenger seat sat 3 heavy photo albums, their spines cracked with years of silence. I wasn't bringing them as memories. I was bringing them as evidence. The granite steps gleamed like marble altars when I climbed them, clutching the albums against my chest. For 32 years, I'd walked through this front door like a guest performing gratitude, but not tonight. Tonight, I rang the doorbell. My father opened it, perfectly pressed shirt, silver hair, that same expression that could curdle confidence in a heartbeat. "You're late," he said, and turned without waiting for me to follow. No hug, no smile, just protocol. In the foyer, my mother stood poised with tissues already in hand, makeup smudged to look tearful but not ruined. "Quinn," she said softly, "we've been so worried." I didn't respond. Her script was too familiar. Guilt, performance, reconciliation. Tonight I wasn't an audience member. I was the witness. Dinner was already set. Beef Wellington, Miles's favorite, not mine. The table gleamed with china and silver, every fork positioned like a soldier ready for ceremony. I set the albums on the sideboard and took my seat opposite my brother. Dad started first, as always. "Your mother and I wanted to have a civilized conversation," he said, carving his meat with surgical precision. "You've caused quite a stir with your purchase." My mother sighed delicately. "Buying a house without consulting us reflects poorly on the family image, Quinn." "People talk," I looked up. "People have always talked, Mom. You just only listen when it's about Miles." Her face stiffened. Dad's knife paused mid-cut. "That's uncalled for," he snapped. "We've done nothing but support you." "Then why is every conversation about what I can give, not who I am?" I asked. Miles shifted uneasily. "Look, Quinn, no one's saying you can't have nice things. But maybe selling the lake house would help keep the peace." I laughed once, short and sharp. "Peace for who?" Before anyone could answer, I stood and opened the first album. The glossy pages caught the candlelight. Miles at 6, blowing out candles. Miles at 10, surrounded by gifts. Miles at 18, keys to a new car in his hand. "Page after page," I said. "Your celebrations. Your milestones." I slid the second album across the table. "This one's mine." Mom hesitated before opening it. Empty pages stared back, interrupted by a few lone photos. Me with a grocery store cupcake, Mrs. Bennett hugging me on my 30th. That's all. "I didn't forget to take pictures," I said quietly. There was just nothing to photograph. Dad exhaled through his nose. "This is melodramatic, Quinn." "No," I said, pulling out the spreadsheet. "This is math. College tuition, car payments, travel expenses, all color-coded, Miles in gold, me in gray." The numbers spoke louder than any accusation. Finally, I laid down a single photo. Christmas dinner, 3 years ago, a perfectly set table, one empty chair. "You sent this to me with the caption 'We missed you,' knowing I was working that night. But look closely." I pointed to the chair. "That's not my usual seat. That's where guests sit. Even when I'm not there, you make sure I stay outside the family circle?" Silence. Thick. Electric. Dad finally stood, face red. "What do you want from us? An apology? Fine. We favored Miles. He's the heir, the achiever. It's what families do." Mom started crying for real now, mascara pooling into her wrinkles. "We didn't mean to, Quinn. It just happened." I looked at her, then at him. "I don't want an apology. I just want distance." I gathered my purse, leaving the albums behind. "Consider them a reminder," I said, voice steady, "of everything you chose not to see." Then I walked out the door without turning back. No trembling, no guilt, no apologies. The quiet click behind me sounded like thunder. For the first time in 32 years, I wasn't leaving my family. I was reclaiming myself. A year later, I woke to the scent of lake air and the sound of laughter drifting through the open deck doors. My 33rd birthday. And for once, it wasn't quiet. The house that once echoed with solitude now pulsed with life. My colleagues from Horizon, Jennifer pouring mimosas, Mrs. Bennett adjusting flowers on the table, music humming softly in the background. Sunlight spilled across the water like melted gold. I set down the champagne bottle, looked around at faces that smiled because I existed, not in spite of it, and felt something I hadn't felt since childhood: belonging. It wasn't the kind born from blood. It was the kind you build, moment by moment, choice by choice, when you finally stop asking to be chosen. Later that afternoon, my brother Miles showed up uninvited, holding a small wrapped box. His voice was awkward, almost careful. "I just wanted to say, I saw the albums again." You were right. Inside the box was a framed photo, me at 7, laughing on an old tire swing. "Proof you existed," he'd said. For a moment I couldn't speak. Maybe healing doesn't begin with a grand apology, but with one small act of recognition. That evening, when the guests had gone and the lake shimmered under moonlight, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I baked carrot cake. You always loved that, didn't you?" I smiled. No anger, no ache, just peace. Because I finally understood, closure isn't something they give you. It's something you give yourself. I stepped onto the deck, raised my glass to the dark water, and whispered, "To the woman who stopped waiting for permission to be seen." If you've ever been the one who had to build your own peace, if you've ever lit your own candle when no one else showed up, then this story was for you. Because somewhere out there, someone's still waiting to remember their own worth. So, if Quinn's journey found a piece of you tonight, if it reminded you that healing is not rebellion but rebirth, leave a like, share your story below, and subscribe for more family stories that honor the quiet victories, the brave boundaries, and the moments when we finally choose ourselves. Because sometimes, choosing yourself isn't the end of the story, it's where it finally begins.